Freeman. Would you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. All right. First order of business is the approval of minutes from our last meeting. Does anybody have anything? All right. Could I get a motion to approve?
Motion approved.
All right. All right. Unanimous. Thank you. Before we get into the agenda items tonight, I know that there's some people here that want to comment on some of the items that we have on our agenda. So I wanted to take 5 or 10 minutes to get some public comment before we go into the meat and potatoes of tonight's meeting. Of course, there will also be ample time for you to make public comment on the individual agenda items, but without further ado, if you'd like to make public comment tonight on anything that we have, please come up, state your name and your business.
Lower this one. Hello, I'm Beverly. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Beverly Barnes. I wrote this all down. I used to be a resident here for many years. Might know some faces here. Was on the Harb, still on the Radnor Conservancy Board, Radnor Historical Society Board, so my heart's still here. And I wanted to I live in Marple Township. Am I supposed to tell my address? Okay. So.
If you could just move the microphone a little bit lower, or you can take a handheld.
Is that good? Yeah?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Perfect. All right, so I work for Delaware County Planning Department. I'm the Historic Preservation Manager. So that's where my background is, and I think why I have a good perspective of the county to give you a few thoughts about what I'm thinking about historic overlay districts, district ordinances. I've witnessed for over many years how communities with historic preservation protection in the form of zoning have a stronger sense of identity, a stronger sense of place, induce more community pride, which creates more responsible citizens, I think, and more committed to their community, and are just a more attractive, build a landscape for visitors as well as homeowners. I think I was around when the first Harb ordinance was created. Now I'm going to figure out what year it was. And I know there's a little bit of fear before it was put into place of like, what's this going to do? How strict is it going to be? But I witnessed over years, and now there's 3 Harb districts, I believe, that it's guided development. It's not, what's going to happen here? Don't tell me what to do. I think it's very good for the community and good for the homeowners, from my perspective. One other point to make is that someone named Donovan Ripkema, who was originally a city planner in Pottstown, I think has gone on to write lots of books about the economic value, I guess, of historic places, and he's pretty much proven or shown much evidence that historic resources, homes that are designated historic, hold their value longer, or have a higher property value than like homes that are not designated, if that makes sense. So there's lots of good stuff here. So I feel also to think about that the type of historic ordinance that I think you guys are thinking about, which is my mind like a scattered site overlay ordinance, is really important because it shows kind of the highlight status buildings, historic buildings, across the entire township. It's not just focused on one district. So it kind of gives, I think, everyone a bit of a sense of pride and a nice feeling of the character remaining. I think that's really important. What I think his last point I want to make is that, and I worked with preservation for a while now, there's national level types of status, National Register for Historic Places. You probably know about that. The county has some information they offer and some status they give, but no place, no level of government except for local has any clout to protect these places. You can be listed on the National Register, tomorrow you can demolish your building. It's odd. In this country, I think it's an odd rule, but it's true. County has no right. Other regional groups have no right. It's the local, municipal level that has the ability through zoning to protect places for their whole community. And I'm here, I'm in the county, but to help anybody if they want to talk about this, they want to look into other examples. I have lots of good examples, and please keep me in mind. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Cheryl Tamola. I got the impression that there was a wariness about having scattered sites and that it would make yet another level of township boards that you would have to go through. And I wanted to cite an example that back in the 80s, the Township Board of Health was interested in things like recycling and household hazardous waste. And what they did, because the township at that time did not want another board either, they appointed a subcommittee of the Board of Health. And what ended up happening is that the people on the subcommittee did their homework, made their case, whatever, and filtered it through the Board of Health, who were able to move it along. So there wasn't another responsibility on the township for another board. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Great. So we had a last-minute request to move the agenda item of 1001 Eagle to put that first on the agenda. We will happily grant that. So, Rob, do you want to go ahead?
Good evening. Thank you for that accommodation. I'm Rob Lambert, Site Engineering Concepts on behalf of Oak Hill. Greg Lingo of Rockwell Development is here to answer any questions. I'm here this evening for a zoning application that we submitted. You've seen this project before. I believe it was fall of 21. We came in for a special exception. You gave a recommendation on that for approval. We have then gone over the last year doing development plans. We've been in front of Shade Tree a few times. I believe we've been back in front of this board. And during the review process, we understand there was a difference in interpretation on what the parking requirement is for this use. So this is a senior living life care residence. I believe the technical term of the code is home for the aged. We applied the section of the code that we felt was the correct section. Later found out that the township's interpretation of it was to count each individual unit as an apartment use, and then to count the personal care, memory care under the ordinance section we calculated. So using the township's interpretation, we need 420 parking spaces, and that would have been for 175 independent living units and 80 memory care, personal care beds. And so using the township, under the institutional uses, the township code for parking becomes cumbersome. I remember an adjacent property we did a application on several years ago, and it came up that I think we needed over 2,000 parking spaces, and the applicant had 700, and they've never had a parking problem. And it's just the way that the township's interpreting the code to count each individual use rather than looking at it as an institution as a whole. And so this is, I think, a similar application of that, where we're counting apartments at 2 spaces per independent living unit. A lot of them are one-bedroom units. The average age of someone moving into these usually exceeds 80. And so many people don't have cars. Some people do have cars, but you're not going to have multiple cars per unit. We're proposing 215 parking spaces, and so we're going to be seeking relief to actually apply the section that we applied under for the code, which gives a formula based on the number of beds as staff and medical staff, is what the requirement was that we applied. And so we're going to be asking the zoning hearing board to apply that same section.
Got it. Commissioner, comment?
Yeah, so my parents were in a retirement community that almost exactly like this proposed community in San Antonio, Texas. It was called the Village at Incarnate Word. And their parking matrix, their residence versus parking is almost identical to what you're proposing. And in my 45 visits there, never had a problem like finding a space to park. So I think I would, from that experience, because I don't know how to take the numbers and like make sense of that just with the numbers. But that was my personal experience in a place much like what this proposed facility is going to be, because it had the same levels, it had almost the same nursing staff numbers, and and so the 450 some parking spaces just seems like way over the top to me, just from that limited exposure that I had.
Any additional commissioner comment? Let's hear from staff.
I don't know that staff is offering a position on this. I think staff is neutral.
Okay. Besides the code itself, Rob, how do you rationalize the request for 215 spaces? Is there anything else that you use to?
So we're actually in excess of what would be required by code, and working with operators, looking at the number of units, the type of units. We have 150 spaces inside, and so in the ground floor of each one of the independent living buildings, there's 25 spaces basically in each side, in each one of these buildings. And then we had 67 surface parking spaces here. And so working with operators of these facilities, they felt that that was sufficient for this use, that we wouldn't have a problem with parking.
Just not to prolong this conversation, but walk us down the path of how this calculation came about. Is there, certain resident ratio, staff ratio that you guys used?
Part of it's both resident and staff, right? So you have the residents for independent living units. They didn't expect that every unit would actually have a car. Some of the independent living units, a percentage of those won't actually have a vehicle. And that's how we came up with the 150 for the 175 units, was a pro rata there. And then we had the personal care, memory care. None of those residents are going to be driving. It's really just visitor. A lot of the staff will be public transit. They'll be providing a shuttle back and forth to public transit to this location, is how we came up with the formula.
So the site in particular is very self-contained, so there's relatively little chance of spillover to adjacent neighborhoods. We certainly get that. The concern here is, on occasion, perhaps on a weekend or a holiday, that you'll be underparked when folks from outside the community come visit their parents, their mom, or whatnot. Is there any consideration for that?
So as you pointed out, we are very self-contained as far as a location, right? We have Eagle Road, which is, I forget how many, 100 feet lower actually than the site itself. We have St. David's, Cabrini. There is opportunity if during those, kind of Black Friday events of shopping, that we do have the loop road going all the way around too. So you could facilitate some parallel parking on that road. Off the top of my head, I think that was 24 feet wide. So even if you parked up against the curb in those events, you'd have adequate capacity.
Okay, got it. I'd like to make a motion to recommend.
Sorry, one question?
Yeah, please.
So you say that the staff will typically take public transportation, is your interpretation?
It'll be a mix of, so there will be some staff taking public transit that will be shuttled back and forth. But we do have 67 surface parking spaces.
Because the closest public transportation, what's the public transportation venue to get to this location?
I would anticipate that it would probably be Radnor, because you pick up both the, I'm going to refer to the old terms, I'm not sure what they're called now, but the R5 and the PNW right there. So I imagine it would be Radnor.
All right, I mean, that just seems like it's like a mile from there, in my estimation.
It might be a little bit more than a mile, but yes.
Right, so workers are just going to take the train or the trolley and then walk 2 miles to work after that?
No, we're going to be providing a shuttle. So
okay.
these facilities usually have shuttle both for residents and staff.
Okay, thank you.
Rob, how much extra impervious surface would you have for 200 extra cars?
There would be a lot. We could accommodate it. We have a lot of, we're well under all the limits. What would likely happen is you'd probably wind up with a large surface lot down toward Eagle Road. Down in this location, it's a flatter portion of the site. Kind of there's a slope through the middle of the site. I know many of you have walked the site, so this is the area of the slope through the middle of the site. And then this is kind of an upper plateau, so we'd be likely adding a large surface parking lot down below. What some of you may or may not know is that our original application actually had the main building out by Eagle Road. And so we actually had the building, and we had a different housing type up top. We went through many neighbor meetings, took a lot of the constructive criticism we heard, and actually redesigned our entire plan. And what we heard was, don't build out by Eagle. We're familiar with the site, build up at the top. And so we really changed the entire plan around to focus the development up top and try not to build really anything down below.
So my quick calculation is about 70,000 square feet.
That sounds reasonable.
Yeah, that won't be impervious. So I think that's great. And if you have an experienced operator who is comfortable with the numbers, I fully support the reduction.
And let's just say that you did build the extra 200 spaces, and if you're talking about the extra 2 acres of asphalt with what you're talking, or almost the 70,000 square feet, what about from a stormwater standpoint? What are the implications of that?
We'd have to build more stormwater, right? So if we built the 200 parking spaces, we would build stormwater to pick up the impervious from that.
Anyone else? Okay, I'd like to make a motion to recommend approval. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. Hopefully we'll see you next month for the
Thanks.
development portion.
All right. Okay, next on the agenda is St. Honore. David?
Good to see you all again. David Falcone here on behalf of the applicant, St. Honore. We have been before you all several times in this project. The last time we were here 2 months ago, I think we had gotten kind of right to the precipice of a recommendation, and we were asked to make sure that we had our traffic study updated and submit that to the staff for their review, which we did. So that's been submitted. Beyond that, nothing has changed in the plan from when you guys were ready to approve at the last meeting, but we have submitted that study. I believe Damon has reviewed it, and we've gotten kind of the high sign from him, but we do have our traffic engineer with us tonight who can answer any questions if there are any. But again, staff has reviewed it and agreed with the findings of the study that there is no meaningful traffic impact. In fact, that it's a reduction in overall traffic as a result of this proposed development.
I think it was actually an increase, wasn't it? A slight increase without taking the credit for the B&B? Is that?
Without taking the credit for the B&B, correct.
Okay, got it. Just wanted to set the record straight there.
With the credit, it goes, there's a reduction.
Sure.
But we do have the whole team here, if there's any questions.
We read the study. We got it. Commissioners, any questions or comments? I do have one thought here, if I may. The street, is it, are you asking for?
Stratford.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry.
Eagle?
The street of the development, the cul-de-sac.
Cul-de-sac, okay.
Are you anticipating asking the township to dedicate the street?
We are anticipating to make that request, yes.
Okay, and would you be opposed to that being a condition?
What would be the condition? I'm sorry, I don't understand.
That the township dedicates the street?
We want it to, we're going to offer it for dedication,
Okay.
without question.
Okay, got it. Okay. Any,
And if the township doesn't take it, hi, Dave.
I was like, more
Yeah, that was, I realized I was sounding maybe like I was coming from on high there, but no, but you're going to offer it for the township. But what if the township says no?
Then I think we have to make preparations to handle for the street. Ultimately, it's up to the township whether they accept the road for dedication. It'll be designed to township specs and ready for dedication, Mary, and then it'll be up to the township. That's all we can do, and then if the township rejects it, we'll have to maintain it. But our intent is to offer it for dedication. I think it should be dedicated.
I think what Mary's trying to say here is that if the township doesn't accept dedication, is that you're limited to 5 homes. Are you not? I mean, is that the incorrect interpretation here?
I don't think, is that what you're suggesting, Mary?
That is what I was suggesting, and mostly because we have staff meetings, obviously, before the planning commission meetings, and that seemed to be the thinking of the engineers, Steve, Roger.
Right. So, the 9-lot plan, as you know, MJ, there's another plan out there that's been approved. This adds the additional units. So we've been extending that 9-lot as this has been coming through. So I guess if the township ultimately denies this project, we'll go back to the previously approved project and move that through, if that were the case.
So restating the chair's question, are you willing to accept the condition that the township accept dedication so that there isn't, you don't leave here with that question unanswered?
We would accept the condition that they accept it. I mean, that we would think we would have to with this project.
Thanks.
So I'm not sure I'm following the question, but I understand. If this project is contingent on the dedication, then obviously we would accept that condition.
Yeah, thanks, Mary.
Thank
That's
you for the
exactly
clarification.
asked and answered. Very
Yep.
good.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Mary.
Any other commissioner comment?
David, what was the
Yes.
density of the priorly approved project?
It was nine lots at the top. Is that correct? On the cul-de-sac road that you're talking about. After kind of that project came through, the lots on the bottom were acquired by the developer, so we placed that previous plan on hold and went to expand that use. So everything you kind of see at the top, the location of the road, the location of those 9 units, that's kind of as it was, by and large. And that also, I believe, led to the update of the traffic report, because when we were here previously, we said we had submitted one for that road on that prior development, and they wanted, I think staff and the planning commission wanted to know what the implication was of the additional units. So that's what we asked our traffic engineer to explore.
And as part of the project, there's going to still be a sidewalk that's going to be constructed on Eagle Road. Is that from Stratford all the way to, or how far will that go?
So staff has asked us to take the sidewalk on Stratford all the way to the Tredyffrin line, and we've agreed to do that. We've also agreed to connect on Eagle. If you remember the last time we were here, there was a gap between the bottom portion of our corner lot there and the house on Eagle next to us. we've agreed to connect there as well. So the sidewalk will run from the entrance of our driveway on the lower portion down to Stratford and then out to the Tredyffrin line.
So just for the audience, where is the Tredyffrin line?
It's down in here, is that correct? There? So kind of identifying on the plan where it heads. It would come all the way down from Eagle to the township line. And then up, David would come from here, kind of all the way down, with a landing on the other side. Sorry. And there's a.
So, I'm sorry, so there's connection from what, Stratford all the way down to Lancaster? Is that,
So Lancaster would come this way.
yeah,
No, we don't go that way. So we come, there's sidewalk here today. That's what was installed by these folks. And it extends this way as well. We're picking it up and bringing it all the way down to the township line.
You're also going to put sidewalk on St. Honore.
Correct. And there'll be sidewalk, which is shown on the plan.
do you need that? Do you need that, the internal sidewalk? From like,
From a code perspective, we do.
Any other commissioner comment, questions?
Just one comment. On the shade tree decision, or
Yes.
lack of such,
Yes.
how does that impact you going forward, Dave?
It doesn't impact us at all
Okay.
tonight.
Okay.
Is there any staff comment? How about the public comment? Please just come up, state your name and where you live. Thank you.
My name is Stacy Morgan, and I live at 424 West Avenue. And I'm just curious, did you guys add shrubbery? Because it looks like you did from the last, it looks like there's a lot more shrubbery there. No? Okay, because this is the one I have that I've been looking at. So this isn't the right plan? That's not the landscape. Oh, okay. Because I was like, oh, you guys were listening, and maybe you had more of a hedge for me. So you mentioned the sidewalk, and I just want to say, I've lived on West Avenue since 2004, and we don't have a sidewalk. And we're right here at a cul-de-sac. We don't have a sidewalk. Just thought I'd say that, and maybe the code is different now and they have to put it in, but if you don't need to, it's just a cul-de-sac with 9 houses, and we probably have more houses on West Avenue. So it might help with impervious stuff and the trees and runoff and stuff not to have the sidewalk. Okay? And sorry about that. Yeah. So that's all. I came to hear about what the decision was. I didn't know about the 5-house rule that for the dedication or non-dedication. I wish I knew about that before. So that's it. Good luck. I don't have anything else.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment?
How are you? I'm Chris Bell. I'm at 420 West Ave, so I'm Stacy's neighbor, and I am here to support this project as is. I've been listening, haven't been able to attend because I'm a working parent, just recently returned to work, and it's been frustrating watching some of the meetings. I think we're getting away from a wonderful plan, and I've heard at the last meeting that you're speaking on behalf of the neighbors, the Shade Tree Commission was, and I am one of the neighbors directly impacted, And it just was disappointing to see that the plans were potentially being, changed at the last minute. And I don't agree with several things that were proposed, and I just wanted to voice my support for the plan as is, including sidewalks. My backyard abuts to the property. There are very, very significant tall trees back there right now that are failing, and they are going to come down as part of this project. And I look forward to that because I have small children, and we can't play back there when it's windy because tree branches fall. Power lines have come down, and this is a blessing to get these trees down. But I hear that the neighbors think that the trees need to stay, and I'm one of the neighbors, and I disagree. So I think that needs to be known that not everybody is in opposition to the project. Secondly, I think the sidewalks are really important, and I just wanted to share that in a picture that there's some sidewalks on Eagle as it is, and it looks like there was good intentions, but reminding people that it's not easy to walk on sidewalks if they're going to be gravel or something other that may be ADA compliant, but common sense should rule the day, and walking on it with a stroller or a walker, which I had to use earlier this year, would make it really difficult if we try and protect certain trees and not put in sidewalks. And as an example of that, here is a picture that I just wanted to share. I'm not sure. Okay.
Can you put that on the table? Yeah, thank you.
So, right, well-intentioned, we got, oh, thank you. Let's not repeat this. Like, concrete sidewalks, ADA accessible, should be a must. But here, look at that sidewalk. I had to use a walker. I couldn't get to that sidewalk because there's no sidewalks on West Avenue. But if I did, I couldn't get up that because I had to go around a tree. That's one that they're going to be connecting into. So I just want to make sure that if you agree to sidewalks, let's not repeat past mistakes.
Are you also in favor of having the sidewalks on the cul-de-sac as well?
Yeah. If I'm agree with the plan as proposed tonight. And they're also looking to put green giants behind my house. I have those trees back there, but I don't want a 60-foot privacy hedge. That's not what all the neighbors want. And so the Nellie Stevens that are back there are going to be sufficiently high in my view, but it's just my view. So again, for what it's worth, but like there's power lines back there too. If you want to put a 60-foot hedge, that's going to, one, block the sunlight that I have currently, and two, there's power lines and I can't maintain it because it's not mine. And I also think that the Planning Commission should be looking favorably upon this project and thinking, how else can we extend sidewalks down West Avenue to North Wayne Ave? There are so many children and families that are in this area now, and we are trapped. We can't walk down West Avenue without worrying about getting hit by a car. So I think that's something outside of the scope of this project, but there's a private investment in sidewalks here, so let's build on it. So that was all I had. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dave Satterfield, and I live at 207 Stratford, which is immediately adjacent to the new homes. And I just want to echo what Chris said, that I'm very much in favor of this plan because I think it's going to bring a much beautiful, more beautiful look to our neighborhood. I mean, right now, we're stuck with trees that are very old, that were never really planned. You know, it's just whatever grew up. And I know personally, I've had to work with the Shade Tree and the Hamiltons to remove several hazardous trees over the years. So that's always been a concern. But I think this plan, you know, over time, it'll create a much more beautiful look because it'll be more cohesive, more planned than what we have today. Also, I echo the comment about the sidewalks. You know, today my wife walks to the train station every morning, and it is extremely dangerous. It's dark. You know, there's no good lighting. So I understand. You know, we will bring in lighting with this plan, right? So that will help. And just removing the trees where the right-of-way is for the sidewalk will make a very significant difference in the safety of our people.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm a little bit nervous. I really don't like to talk in public. So my name is Paula Sarate. I live in 231 Stratford Avenue, which is this one over here. So as you can see, I'm going to be surrounded by construction. I don't know for how many months. Nevertheless, I'm pretty much pro this development, and I'm pretty much begging for the sidewalks. My husband also walked to the train station, and he's been almost run by a car almost 3 times. He changed like the lights that he uses at night because cars will not stop or will not slow down. My daughter, which is 5 years old, went trick-or-treating on Monday, last Monday, and as we were walking in the street, there was a car that it was 50 miles per hour in a 25-mile street. It didn't care. And because there is like also a curve and it's also dark, she was almost hit. On the side of that, I also have parents, 76, 77 years old. Sometimes they have problems walking, and moving from side to side to being able to do that safely, it's a concern to me when they come and visit. So far, what the developer is showing me in terms of doing the right thing by putting this sidewalk, for me is correct, regardless of the trees that are going to be put away, because he has indicated that he has going to plant more trees than what he's going to take out. So for me, that's the better of this. And also, what he's suggesting in terms of how it's going to be all set up is way better to what I'm accustomed now, because I've been living in this neighborhood for 7 years, and unfortunately, because the Hamilton property is in the stage that is now, it is a problem to maintain the landscape. We spend a lot of money every year trying to cope with the weed and all the stuff that is growing, also the wildlife that is coming now, ticks and stuff like that. And by doing this, I believe we will control and we will preserve it in a better way. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Any other public comment? Commissioners, any additional comment, questions?
I'd just like to say, I like the plan, and I'm completely for the sidewalk on Stratford and I guess Eagle Road. But I still don't understand, even from a code standpoint, why it's needed that you need a sidewalk on a cul-de-sac. We had the same situation on Ithan Avenue. What was the name of the development? It was on with.
You're thinking of 200 South Ithan, Mr. Nat.
Thank you. Yeah, 200. Yeah, we had the same situation there, and then we had the debate. It's like, why do you have? And I'm just thinking about impervious, and as well as obviously for the developer, I'm thinking about the cost of doing it. It's just, in my mind, it's a waste of money, or perhaps you could redeploy that money to something else for the benefit of the township by either extending the sidewalks, perhaps further distance, or but to have concrete sidewalks, and is that going to be on both sides of the street in the cul-de-sac, Dave?
So, Mr. Nat,
Asking for a partial waiver. We're actually asking for a partial waiver to not have to bring the sidewalk all the way up this side of the road.
I mean, I just don't understand the purpose of a sidewalk in a cul-de-sac.
So Mr. Chair, so that is our ordinance, right, that a sidewalk is required, a 4-foot concrete sidewalk. And I will just tell you anecdotally, we, just as the gentleman said over there, we do get requests for sidewalks in developments that don't have them. So my recommendation, for what it's worth, is to accept the ordinance as it stands. I don't have a problem with them not putting it on the north side. I don't see that that serves a purpose, but I think it does serve a safe way for residents to get their kids down to the bus stop or whomever may be walking. And full disclosure, I'm a big proponent of sidewalks and trails.
Sure, and from my standpoint, and I want to be fairly neutral on this, I live in a development that looks sort of like this without the sidewalk, and with 3 young children, you do want some sort of minimal sidewalk to be able to walk to the end of that road to catch the bus or what have you. So I would support the partial sidewalk that obviously serves the houses, obviously on the north side of that plan. There's probably no need.
Does it affect the township's decision process in terms of accepting a street for dedication, whether or not a sidewalk is there?
So, Skip, that's a board decision when the time comes. I don't know how that will weigh, but again, it is the ordinance, and we run into various situations where folks want sidewalks, and we see the need. We talk about connectivity, we talk about our trails plan and all that. So I think this is proper as shown, but I can't speak for the Board of Commissioners.
I just want to also briefly go on record that I think it's a good idea to have the sidewalk on that one side.
So the question I have, Mr. Steve, is that why wasn't there consistency, say, with the development off of South Ethan?
So, Mr. Nat, the 9 lot does have to have the sidewalks. They requested the waiver, right? Am I correct, Damon?
Yeah, they received a waiver for that. We did request for them to have sidewalk, and they received a waiver not to have sidewalk on the.
So that's, again, that's a board decision?
Got it. Okay, thank you. And I respect your thoughts. I'm not going to completely disagree with that, particularly when it comes to safety for young kids.
So this is a question to the solicitor with respect to, and I'm trying to form this motion, if we were to recommend approval. Are we making this subject to the township? Can we make it subject to the township accepting dedication?
Yeah, the proposed conditions that I'm looking at are compliance with the Gannett Fleming letter of October 27, 2022, the Gilmore letter of September 2nd, 2022, October 25th, 2022, further condition upon township acceptance of the cul-de-sac street as a public street, and then granting the waivers requested as set forth in the Gannett Fleming letter.
Okay. So I'd like to ask for a motion that incorporates all of that. Second?
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. All right. Thank you.
I just wanted to say thank you guys for taking the time and being thoughtful on this project and giving us the opportunity to come back and talk with you guys. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Good luck.
Thanks, Dave.
All right. Next on our agenda is 317 Ivan Avenue.
Hi, I'm Julie Bernstein with Kaplan Stewart, and let's see if I can get this open for you guys. So, as I mentioned, Julie Bernstein with Kaplan Stewart. We represent the applicant that is here tonight to discuss with you their proposal to do a minor subdivision of 317 Ivan, which I'm guessing you guys might be familiar with because it's right next door to this building. So here's the location of the property. So here's basically us, and it's right next door. The property is currently approximately 118 square feet, and it's improved with a single-family dwelling and associated improvements served by public sewer and water, and the improvements are set back a little bit further off of the property, so currently the backyard's non-conforming, and its frontage is along Ivan, which currently has no sidewalks. The property is located in the R3 Residence District, so single-family dwellings are permitted on minimum lot sizes of 10,000 square feet. So what the applicant is proposing to do here is to subdivide this into 2 lots that one lot would be approximately 14,285 square feet, and then the second lot would be 13,703 square feet. So in excess of that 10,000 square feet minimum, and each would be improved with a single-family dwelling. The current existing dwelling that's there, which is a single story, would be demolished in order to make this plan. The entire plan is to code, so it complies with all of the applicable zoning regulations. We are going to be asking for 3 related small waivers in connection with the fact that the right-of-way that's there complies, but the existing cartway is narrower than what could be provided for. And again, there's no sidewalks or curbing along the entirety of the street. So if you put it right in front of these kind of 2 small homes, it wouldn't really connect to anything else, so wouldn't be particularly functional and might look odd. There's also a concern if you widen the road that potentially people might think it's extra parking instead of driving right by. It would be, I think, 7 feet. So those would be the 3 small waivers. Otherwise, we've received the 2 consultants' letters, and we're going to be able to comply with everything. For example, we had a note on the plan that there was some vegetation that needed to be cut back to make sure that there'd be sight distance from the 2 driveways coming off of the lots. They have removed some of the vegetation, and our engineer's gone out, and we can totally comply with the sight distance. So again, this is just a small kind of subdivision that would provide for 2 new nice homes next door. They want to keep everything really nice and green to the extent that they can. So they're happy to kind of put up a buffering that I think was mentioned in one of the letters between the property and this municipal kind of parking lot that's there. And I do have Scott Emerson with me from the developer if you guys have more specific questions that I can't answer, but we are hoping you will support this improvement of your neighbor's lot.
You know, I have a couple of early questions on this. I drove past the house today. I noticed multiple meter heads, you know, for electricity had been removed, and multiple heads suggest to me that maybe it was multi-tenanted for a while there.
I'm not sure. Do you know that it was multi? I'm not sure. I mean, it is improved with a single-family dwelling. It's one story that was there, so.
The other thing I noticed is that it looked like the garage door had partially been removed, so there's access to the garage right there, like an opening in the side of the house. And the last question I had, I looked at the plans and things like that. Is there any issue with the stream that's down in that area? Any riparian right problems that we should know about?
You might be able to answer this the second, or maybe even the first.
Good evening, I'm Scott Emerson. To answer your questions about the meters were removed as part of the demolition process. So what we have to have done by Aqua and Pico is they have to remove them. Then we have to have an inspection, and so that's been done, which is what you're referring to. As far as the garage you're talking about, there's like a sliding portion of I guess it's kind of like the shed, it's kind of like a shed sliding garage door. That's just been slid open and just had to be shut. We've applied for a demolition permit, and we've received that. And so demolition of the house should probably happen in the next couple of weeks. So we want to get it down so it doesn't become a
Hazard.
a vessel for activity that we'd prefer not happen there. So that's underway.
And the last question about possible riparian rights issues.
We do not have any issues with that, no.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the commissioners?
Can you tell me what's the size of the current house right now, and what will be the size of the 2 houses that you intend to build?
So, do you know this offhand?
I think the existing home at the time was, I believe it was about 2,400 square feet in total.
I think you had 1,481 coming down, and you're building 2 units that are about 2,100.
So what we're referring to in that, you're talking about the footprint? And so what I'm saying.
I just remembered looking at the documents, and it looked like the existing house had a small footprint.
Correct. So the 1,400 you're referring to is the footprint of the building, so that's a calculation for impervious, but it's also a 2-story building. So what we're doing in the real estate advertisements, if you would, with houses, we include the livable habitable area, so it'd be the first floor and the second floor. So with the 2 of them combined, it was about just a little over 2,000 square feet that was existing. The house we were proposing, it's still to be determined, but we expect them to be about 3,700 to 4,000 square feet-ish. We're not. Each, correct, yes. We're not done with architecture yet.
And what are the setbacks with the neighboring property?
Hold on.
Are you talking about the side yard setbacks?
Correct.
I believe there's 17 and a half. Julie, you can go back to
The
plan.
main,
Yeah,
the
it
main
has
plan
one
is
there.
better, okay.
I believe it's 17 and a half. There was a typo that our engineer had on the plans, which we're correcting.
And what's code?
We're meeting, all the setbacks are to meet code. We're not proposing anything other than what's in code.
Let's see. Have it there.
Front yard setback is 35 feet. Minimum side yard is 15 feet with a 35-foot aggregate. Minimum rear yard is 35 feet, which is what we propose.
Any other questions, commissioners? How about staff?
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. I do have a couple questions for the applicant. The site distance. We're unaware, I don't know, that Mr. Drummond's comment noted the applicant should meet with staff to verify adequate site distance. I don't know who, if anybody was met with, and we don't have plans that show that. Also, Mr. Phillips, in his review, noted, bear with me, areas containing steep slopes, about that dot, shall be separately identified. Please show existing steep slopes. We feel that there may be steep slopes at the front entranceway at that sidewalk that aren't shown. So we would like to see plans that show the site distance, depicted on the plans with the triangle, as well as verification or not of steep slopes at the front, at the door area and walkway. And lastly, there is a storm sewer that the developer is going to reroute, and that just needs to be dedicated to Radnor Township.
Regarding the site distance, yes, we have made the request of your consultant to meet it with our engineer to confirm what our engineer has found. As of today, that hasn't happened, but the request, I believe, was made last week, but that will be noted on the plans to be submitted in the future. The second question was the steep slopes, which our engineer, I believe, will have on the plans. We're not aware of steep slopes on there, but we will have that noted on the plans as well. And thirdly, we would expect a easement and dedication to the township regarding stormwater.
It all helps. I know we will work with the engineer to show, but this is the way it looks. If you didn't drive by and were looking on Google Maps, you would see a lot of the foliage that was kind of in the way, so it's all been cleared out. And this is, Scott, I think you took these photographs potentially just recently, showing that you can easily see from kind of the base of where the driveways are.
So, Mr. Norsini, with respect to the three items that you brought up, is this a will comply, or should we, what are your thoughts?
So, Mr. Freeman, this is a preliminary final. I would request or suggest to the commission that we see plans that are fully compliant, noting all the waiver requests at the December meeting.
Okay. So noted. Thank you. Commissioners, any thoughts, comments?
I'd like to see the plans as clean as possible before we do anything.
Yeah. That seems to be the tempo here. Okay. Could we make a motion on that? Are you making the motion?
Do we have public comment yet?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there public comment? Please come up and state your name and your address.
William Madonia. I'm at 318 Ivan Avenue, so I'm right across the street.
If I could just ask you, we do have an audience of maybe 20 tonight. If you could speak into the microphone so they can hear at home.
All right. William Madonia, 318 Ivan Avenue. And, so my first question was about the setback. 35 feet is the code? When I looked at the plans at the engineer's desk, you have front porches that are only 17, 18 feet from the street. So that's a big difference.
I think what you're referring to is on our proposed footprint, which isn't completely designed. We're talking about front porches, which are, I believe by code, are allowed to go in front of the front yard setbacks. I'm sorry, it might be patios, but our porches are not going over the front yard setback. We're behind those.
35.
Yes.
All right. Well, that plan is different than what's on file at the engineer's department. I also concerned about the fact that these are going to be two more or less cookie cutter houses with twin S-shaped driveways that are going to be paralleled with a bloated segment of the driveway for extra parking that will be seen from the street. Plus, both units have 25-foot wide double-door garages facing the street. So it's a significant aesthetic change from what's there in the community now, where you don't have a lot of driveways going straight to massive double doors and bloated driveways for extra parking with front porches that are minimum distance from the street. So right away, just the aesthetics of it, I find jolting, because this is not what's there now. So the other thing is, I know you mentioned that you can't have too many trees because everything has to be at least 10 feet away from some type, anything underground, utilities or sewers or stormwater. You can't have any major trees. So you can only have 4 trees you've allotted to the front yard. And all the other trees that you've put are between this building and your houses. But there's no other landscape that's going to be possible on this lot because you've condensed it all. Instead of having one house, it would be a generous amount of landscaping. I find that this is, you're cutting it down to the bare minimum. And of all the trees that are there now, you're letting one survive in the very rear southeast corner. And you've just dismissed all the other trees. You said 3 dogwoods are just old. There's a Douglas fir that you don't like the look of. Kentucky coffee tree is leaning and has a split lead, so we're just gonna, you just summarily dismissed all the trees that you would otherwise have to replace.
The one thing I'll say, though, is that they're going to have to come before the Shade Tree Commission.
Well,
They're going to get a lot of advice on that kind of
I
thing.
think that that's going to play very heavily, though, on whether or not the lot should be divided. Because even if they say, okay, well, we're going to replace them, there's no room to replace them because of the stormwater basins, and they have that easement between the 2 houses can't be any closer together because that's the minimum required for stormwater.
But what they have a right to do is come before the Shade Tree Commission with a plan.
Okay.
And then the Shade Tree Commission has a right to tell
I
them.
think before they
that,
go through all
you know,
that work
there
and
are
they
ways-
get committed to this.
It's where we're set up, you know? Would it be better to get it before Shade Tree first? Maybe, but.
But this is, at this meeting, you're trying to say whether or not you think it's a good idea to split the property in 2.
So our purview here is limited to the lot size and setbacks and everything else. Shade Tree will get a crack at it, and I can guarantee you that they'll look at this plan with a fine-tooth comb, as they usually do.
It's not that I'm a big tree lover, but when you have these, you have a lot of cement on the front, you know, like you said, you have parallel-less driveways, extra bit of parking. It just seems like there's a lot, and you're asking for us to approve split of property, but yet you won't come up with a definite architectural rendering of what it will look like. I mean, yes, they're not exactly the same because they're a few feet basically, but from one of your plans, it looks like the same 2 houses, the same format, the same porches, the same placement of the windows. It's just not true. These are 2. So, I don't know, in this neighborhood, there aren't too many other segments that have 2 twin houses, really micro houses, right next to each other. So that's my grievance. I think there's going to be a jarring change of aesthetics instead of just doing one normal house that's matching the rest of the community.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Or you'd like to respond?
Just real quick, just while it's fresh in my head. Regarding the existing trees that are on the property, we hire consultants to go out and determine the health and the condition of vegetation. We do that on all of our projects, and we do this here as well. That report's been submitted to the township and is noted on the landscape plan, which, as you mentioned, will be also discussed at the Shade Tree Commission. The one tree that was mentioned that we're saving, we actually are encroaching and revised our stormwater management, which would be referring to as Lot 1, which is in the back, I'm going to say southeast corner. That was moved specifically so we could save what was deemed to be a very good condition tree. Trees are obviously valuable on our properties. We don't like to take more down than we have to, plus it costs money to take them down. So with that being said, the condition and the reality of what is there, whether it's age, whether it's split, whether it's been struck by lightning, whether it's dead, decay, decline, all those things are a factor. And of course, we do the required replacement plantings, which, again, will be discussed moving forward. If anybody's familiar with any of the Bentley Homes communities, we actually do quite a significant amount of landscaping. I think at the end of the day, the township and the neighbors will probably be pretty pleased at what occurs here.
We feel confident that the Shade Tree Commission will take care of this and take a good look at your plan. Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes, sir.
Hello. Oh, shit, sorry. Hi, my name is George Hayward. I live at 331 Ivan, which, if I can, this guy right here. And I think your plans were probably submitted before we bought our house, so the deed doesn't reflect our ownership. But anyway, so full disclosure, I am a real estate developer. I'm not going to crush you, I promise. I just had a couple questions for you guys. One, and it looks like on the plans there isn't an intent to take a fence line all the way to the property, to the frontage up here. Can you confirm that?
Not this time. We're not proposing anything now.
Okay. So a man over here talked about sidewalks. I love you, man. So this, you guys probably know this because you come in and out of this. This is a crazy dangerous street. Full disclosure, had I known how dangerous this street was when I bought my house, I would not have bought my house. I got 3 little kids. It is a death trap. Nobody is going to park on this street, just so you know. I don't want to be the guy to like push for sidewalks because I know I've been in the same situation where you are right now. If there is a way to find a way to put in sidewalks, I understand that it currently would be a sidewalk to nowhere. Like I would even offer to dedicate the front portion of my property if the township would build sidewalks. Like it is super dangerous. And there is a playground, as you guys know, right down here. And this neighborhood is full of little kids who right now we tell people to walk through our front yard because like you don't want to have people walking on that street. The prior owners were didn't know them for very long, super friendly. They invited us to walk through their front yard. If I'm honest, if somebody said, whoever bought these houses said that they were okay with that and there wasn't any kind of obstruction, that would probably satisfy me. But we can't guarantee that. Obviously, we don't know who's going to buy these. So I guess my one thing that I would ask for is some consideration to like figure out a way to make this a little bit safer. It's really, really freaking scary. So, and especially when the cops come like ripping in and out. I understand you can't put speed bumps there because they don't want to be hopping over speed bumps at 60 miles an hour. But I would just say that like in general, I really support this. I really hope that these are 2 great new families, hopefully, young families, but anybody who comes here who are really friendly, wonderful neighbors, I totally agree with everything you're doing. You even got a swale along my property line, which looks wonderful, so you're not going to run off storm into my property. Generally speaking, I'm really in support of this. I'm just wondering if there's any way we can figure out a way to like not perpetuate the terrible lack of sidewalk situation. So. And I'm happy to talk to you like offline too if you want to chit chat about what's going on.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that I've lived in this township for 37 years, and because I don't live on Ivan Avenue, I don't lose any sleep over it. But when I drive on Ivan Avenue, I think about that all the time, and I see people working, putting plants in on the road, and people are going 6 inches past them, at 40 miles an hour, and it's like, and if 2 cars coming the other way, forget about it. So it's like I think your point is really, really should be well taken here. And if there's anything we can do at this stage to make something happen, I think we should try.
Could I just ask, what was the address, your address?
Mine?
Yeah.
331. So 2 lots to the left. Our property spans 2 lots.
Just a quick comment. So we do technically have the right-of-way there, and just if we were building a sidewalk right now, again, it goes nowhere, but an alternate way of dealing with it would be maybe some type of offer that we could leave this aside, that if there was a sidewalk that was built down in the future, that we would agree to that as, you know, a future plan versus doing it right now where it's really not going anywhere, and then it wouldn't necessarily be in line with, you know, a continuation. But that is something that, you know, we talked about as being like, there is technically right of way in front that could be converted.
Okay. Well, it sounds like there's a desire for y'all to come back. I don't think we're going to take a vote tonight unless you'd like us to, but we'd like for you to come back and resolve the township engineer comments.
Yeah, we're happy to come back if that's how you guys are leaning, that we can put together the kind of updates of the few things in the comments so that you have a cleaner plan. That's fine.
Sure. And I think the comment on the sidewalk from certainly the commissioners and the public, I think that's a fair comment. I think you should examine the possibility of making that work.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chairman, actually, to that point, so 2 of the 3 waivers, one is the sidewalks, the other is the roadway widening. Would it be appropriate to just get a sense of the commission for the developer to look at said road widening and sidewalks? Is there a sense of the commission? I know those waivers have to go to the commissioners, but and it's your call, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. No, I actually think that's a great idea that we poll the commissioners. Shall we just do it sequentially? Start with road widening?
Yes, sir. That'd be great.
Okay. All right. Let's just go down the line and just get a sense of what y'all think of road widening.
Road widening, I think, would be very beneficial to I think it would be beneficial to this project.
I concur with that.
Agree.
Okay.
Okay, so let me just understand. As far as road widening and sidewalk, if you widen the road, is that going to make the sidewalk more difficult to put in?
It's a good question.
Is it better, is another option same width, but sidewalk?
Yeah. Yes, that would be, but that's also, I think, a little bit why I was saying you could, if you didn't want a sidewalk immediately because nowhere else had it, that you could, you know, institute that later when there was more planning, potentially of the entire block. But yes, if you leave the road as is, because if we widen in front of these 2 spots, it wouldn't widen anywhere else on Ivan, just right here. So it would be, that was what I was mentioning, is kind of like, is that potentially a parking spot? Will that make people be faster right there and try to merge in a weird way? Because it's not going to continue. It will just be right there, but you could put a sidewalk on the edge of the road. So would be providing us with a waiver from the road widening, but not a waiver from the sidewalk requirement.
Where would you envision the sidewalk going? Right next to the road, or would there be a little strip in between and it would go over into?
Like a tree line? Is that you're talking about a tree line strip? Is that?
The verge, you know, whether it be 1, 2, 3 foot of grass, if you will, between Ivan Avenue and a possible sidewalk.
Yeah, I mean,
Correct.
If you're worried about a safety issue, putting a sidewalk on the road may not, you know, create a safe environment. But if you have the road, a little strip of grass, and then the sidewalk, then you're separating the 2. And I'm just saying, if you widen the road, it just seems to be counter to that idea.
Well, you're also creating a shoulder. If you widen the road without a sidewalk, theoretically, it would be safer because you'd have a shoulder. So
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add one thing for the commission's benefit, is just to the right of these properties on the plan north in the upper right corner is the small culvert crossing the creek there, and that's fixed. That really can't be widened without really being replaced and a complete new structure installed there. So that's a limit to how wide the road is at that point.
But in theory, with respect to the sidewalk, you could, if you were to continue it beyond this development, you could go around it?
No, the sidewalk would have to somehow come onto the township's property and then utilize the parking lot of the township. There's not room on that bridge to cross safely within the confines of the bridge itself.
Okay.
I agree there's
Pedestrian
not
bridge.
room, I agree there's not
Pedestrian.
room on the bridge, but could we do something on the, I'm gonna call it on the outside of the bridge to get to the, like, in my opinion, getting to this
There
playground.
is no outside of the bridge. It goes down into the creek. It would have to utilize the township's property coming through the parking lot.
If
It
you
would have to be
remember on the
one-
18-lot subdivision of Eastern, they're putting in a pedestrian bridge because of this exact situation. And I'm not saying that the developer should do that, but Mr. Phillips is dead right. You could come up into the township area, pedestrian bridge, there's ways if, when something like that occurred.
I also think that if you can get to the township building property, then you can walk around, can you not? I wouldn't, I mean, if I were walking it, I certainly wouldn't walk on the roadway where the little bridge is. You'd just go into the parking lot and walk over to the playground.
If you park there. But
So-
if you're coming from Brookside, I'm envisioning coming from Brookside.
So it sounds like the road widening, if I heard you correctly, would be very limited to just in front of the subdivision, right?
Yes, that's correct. And you can't require them to do off-site transportation improvements either. So they're only subject to the area that fronts their lot frontages.
Mhm. It sounds to me like that precludes the widening, and we're sort of limited to the sidewalk. Is that fair? Okay. All right. So let's deal with the sidewalk. Is there Commissioner sense that we would like to see a sidewalk in the plan?
Yes.
I'm seeing a lot of nodding, so.
Yes.
All right.
I guess the 1/3, although I can kind of guess, but there's also curbs. So it was the three things. You'd widen the road, curbs, and sidewalks. Do you want curbs and sidewalks? Just sidewalks?
I
Care
don't.
about a curb?
I don't foresee any other way other than with a curb, unless the commissioners disagree.
Can you just explain what you would be doing with the curb?
Sure. I think, curbs serve two purposes. Number one is, I think, pedestrian safety, an additional layer of pedestrian safety, but also water runoff control.
But you would just have the curb from their lot or their future two lots to the municipal building, right? So what about anything that precedes it from Brookside through to their lot? What happens there? I mean, from a practical standpoint, so this way you're just gonna have, what purpose, I guess the question is, and listen, I am for safety, and the gentleman, I did the same thing in 2013. I get you, and I have 3 young kids, and I live on a busy street, and every day I wonder when I'm gonna get clipped. But if you have a curb on your 2 lots, what's the point?
Sure. And so from my vantage point, and I speak for myself, with respect to sidewalks, this is a sidewalk to nowhere. We get that. But this is where sidewalks get started. And if the overarching thought is that we need to improve the safety of the pedestrian population, especially the young pedestrian population, that we need to begin somewhere. And this is a start. This is an opportunity. Obviously, it's an opportunity at your expense. We get it. But I think there's at least one neighbor there that's probably willing to make the investment in joining this sidewalk if they were so able.
So let me ask you a question, just for my own education. So if you have this lot that's going in on your lot, on your two lot, or I'm sorry, if you have the sidewalk that's going in on your two lots, and then basically all the other lots on the same side of the street, up to Brookside, maybe all the way up to Aberdeen. If all the homeowners agree to that, sir, if you agree to that, where would the cost be to put in the sidewalk? Would that be, I mean, is that something that is that a township thing?
So the township has done several sidewalk projects in the last year. There's two options. The township can fund it through various, whether it be grant or just from the general fund, or property owners can be assessed per front footage. I have not seen Radnor assess anybody to date on a sidewalk project, but they're your two options.
And so the township also has right to do that through each homeowner's lot, or how does that work? Do you have to
Within the
condemn it?
right of way?
Oh, you have the right of way?
I might be mistaken, and I don't want to overstep, but when you transfer a property in Radnor, there's this extra transfer tax that is a sidewalk tax. Whether or not all that money gets used for sidewalks, I'm not sure.
So I'm sorry, so when you sell your home in Radnor Township, if you have sidewalk, we inspect it and we'll note if any need to be replaced. It's not a tax. What may occur is a seller may wish to escrow the money to repair the sidewalk so they can go to settlement, but there is no sidewalk tax per se. Right, so if there's no broken sidewalk and you sell your home, you don't escrow any money.
All right, I think there was additional comment from the public.
I just want to let the record show, I don't want to like overcomplicate this. Roadway widening and all that stuff. I mean, I think my guess is that like we can probably figure out a way to make this like fairly reasonable for everybody. Like I don't want to screw you over. I just want to be super clear about that. I think your suggestion about a provision for doing this in the future, like I want to be super clear that I don't want this to be the tail wagging the dog, right? Like for two houses. I'm just trying to more call it to the attention of the board that it's an issue here. And to me, it seems like as a resident, like just and a neighbor, I would support the idea of a provision for something in the future, right? Or like basically, figuring out a way to grade it right so that it is providing the literal pathway and figurative pathway for it when the township decides to do something at a scale that makes sense, so that you're not creating a pathway to nowhere, which is a very reasonable concern. And I think in my mind, that seems like a pretty fair outcome for the developer who is, there's a cost to this. So I don't want to foist unnecessary problems on them, but I'm just more thinking about this as a way to can you start here with like a provision?
Yeah, I think we've already indicated to the developer what we'd like to see at our next meeting on December 5th. Obviously, it's a recommendation. It's not a ruling. We're not taking a vote here tonight. We'd like to see you on December 5th, and then we'll deliberate at that time of what the plan looks like. All right.
I just have one question for the person in the audience who's been commenting, the other real estate developer. Does that mean there's one house between you and the property? You're at 321?
I'm 331.
Oh, 331, okay.
And so what they call Lot 1, which is the one on the left, I believe, right? On your plan? On the left of the screen? Oh, that's Lot 2 is on the left? Sorry. What they call Lot 2 would be adjacent to my house. So lot 2, my driveway, the house, my house.
And then only one more house. The next house to you would be the corner of Brookside and, okay.
Any other commissioner comment? Okay, thank you. We'll see you December 5th. All right. Next on the agenda is Villanova.
Yep. Sure. Go ahead.
So just for the record, this is a zoning application where there's 3 ways that we can dispense with it. Either it can recommend, be neutral, or recommend denial.
Evening, Nick Cornelia representing Villanova. I have with me Mary Lou Smith and Chris Kowalski from the university. As was stated, this is a zoning request. There's 3 requests being made by Villanova here. The first one is height. The building is located in the middle of campus. It's actually going to be on the site of Kennedy Hall, if you know where Kennedy Hall is, which is the bookstore now, and basically where they sell all the clothing and everything else on campus. Kind of probably the closest neighbor is the train tracks. We're not asking for any zoning relief. There is no setback relief required. The relief being requested is height, and Mary Lou will show you exhibits. Basically, almost every building in the middle of campus here where this is located exceeds the height limitation of the township ordinance. We're also asking for building length relief. Again, on this, really the ordinance on building length is more of an architectural feature. And even though we are longer than the requirement as to the break for architectural features, we are less than what is required by the ordinance. And finally, we're asking for relief from providing parking for this project, since this is basically servicing the current students on campus, and no additional students or parking will be required. So I'll turn it over to Mary Lou.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Nick. I'm Mary Lou Smith with Villanova, and I have a brief presentation for you about this new library that we're planning. So as Nick said, we're asking for 3 variances. And this is our campus map. So if you look at these 2 circles, the current library location is in the center of campus, and it is Old Falvey and New Falvey Hall. Where we're proposing to put this new library is in the, excuse me, the location of Kennedy Hall. And I'm not sure if anyone knows where Kennedy Hall, but this is the location right here. It's the center of campus. And if you don't know what Kennedy Hall is, this is what it is. It's our bookstore right now, and has some of our student services in it. The plan is to move this function into Falvey, the old Falvey Library. And this is what we plan, this is the proposed location, and what we plan to build in that location is this library. This is from the south side, the view from the south side, which if you're familiar with Villanova's campus, it's at the Ellipse and the Oreo area. This is from the east side, which as you're entering the main gate, this is what you'll see. And to your left over here is Conley Center, and over here is the SAC parking garage. And the final image here is the view from the west side, which is kind of a view from where Old Falvey and New Falvey reside right now. So the reason we're looking for these variances are because traditional university library designs primarily focused on massive storage of massive amounts of books. They featured large, undivided floor space with row after row of stacks. It lacks study space for students and student collaboration. It wasn't really meant to be an active, vibrant building. Current university library designs are very different. They are very focused on student services, learning support areas, writing centers, math centers, individual study space, collaborative study space, and it's become a very digital, virtual world inside of a library. So there is, typical or older libraries have a large collection of general book collections, whereas this will have a reduced, condensed general book collection, along with spaces to display and keep in secure spaces our distinct special collections. Again, the variances that we're asking for, 60 feet instead of 38, which is what the ordinance is, 280 feet building length when the ordinance is 160 feet, and we're asking for 0 parking. And the reason that we're looking for the building height is newer buildings today are designed with a higher floor-to-ceiling heights to support all the different mechanical, electrical, life safety, technological infrastructure that's required for newer buildings. The environmental systems have larger ductwork for more outside air, and additional space is required for data conduits and all the technology that is in new buildings. And we feel it's more sustainable to build higher than to build a larger footprint, even though we're going to ask you next for the larger footprint. And so we're looking for the building length because the way the ordinance is, it's end to end, whereas we're kind of looking at this building footprint is maximizing that area that you see, and it supports the program that we need for this building. So if you look at some of these different widths, most of them are not greater than 160 feet without there being some sort of an offset. And the offsets are significant. They're not, a foot or two, but they're a nice size offset. So, although it's 280 feet end to end, we look at these, the largest length would be 148 as opposed to that. And then we're looking for not adding any additional parking. And the reason that we're asking for this is, in 1990, we housed probably 50% of our undergraduate enrollment. And by 2022, we now house 85% of our enrollment. When buildings were designed in the past, they were primarily focused on whatever that building design was. If it was a classroom building, we built classrooms. If it was, dormitory, we built, rooms. You weren't building lounge space or study space. It was very single focused. And now that we have, 85% of our undergraduate enrollment on campus, we've increased the amount of people that live there. And we're trying to provide space for them to actually, amenity space. And what you see in our new library is program space that is literally, private study space, collaborative learning space. There's 2 floors of it. So we feel that based on that, we don't really need to add parking because we're really serving the students that exist on campus. We do not think that this building is going to be a destination for additional visitors to campus and will not increase will not lead to an increase in enrollment as a result of it. It's really a support to our existing students. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes.
Great. Hi, Skip.
Go ahead, Skip.
I went to Villanova and graduated in '73. I remember when Kennedy was sort of a new building. Can you tell us how wide Kennedy is right now and how high?
I can tell you how
Or
high it
tall.
is. It is, I think, 30, hold on, it's on one of these slides. It's 38 feet, 4 inches.
And you have a guess, perhaps, on the width?
160.
It's really ugly. It was ugly then, too.
There's
the
one
new
person
building-
on campus that likes it, I have to say, though.
Well, I like the newness of it at the time, and it was easy to use the store, but
Yeah.
it didn't, it seemed like a aberration, like it didn't fit
Yeah,
with all the other buildings. And this new thing looks like it'll fit very well.
thank you.
So, Mary Lou, I do appreciate the sort of collegiate Gothic aesthetic of the new structure. I do have some questions regarding use. Your exhibit, it looks like you have 4 stories that are above ground, 1 story below, and the mechanicals, I guess, on this quasi-5th level. If I'm reading this correctly, what puts you over the limit are these 2 towers that are to the side. Is that correct?
No.
Okay.
So the floor to ceiling height is 15 feet for, I think, 3 of the floors. 1 floor is 17 feet.
Okay.
And that's the main floor as you enter. And when I say 17 feet, that's not going to be the finished ceiling height, but that is the floor to underside of the next floor structure.
Oh, yeah, that's right. So
When you do that, there's actually, if you're looking at in the front, there's 2 floors below grade, and then the grade kind of drops off. So the back of it, where the parking lot is, will have 4 floors exposed.
So the towers are in addition to.
Yes, they're spires, I guess, and they are exempt from the calculation.
Sure.
Yeah, they're not included.
Right.
Gotcha.
That's non-functioning. It's like
Exactly.
So there's no use contemplated for those.
No.
Okay.
It covers the utilities, the HVAC, and instead of having them on the roof, they're covered by this architectural feature.
And it's the aesthetic that agrees with the rest of what's been going on at Villanova since I've been on the commission, a similar look to the
Fieldstone.
campus. So,
Fieldstone.
bringing it, making the campus make sense aesthetically, which I think Villanova's done a good job of.
Okay.
With the development of the building itself, will it be built up to LEED certification?
Yes, absolutely.
And on the roof itself, because you have, looks like some sort of like a parapet type of a wall, so is there an opportunity to put in solar panels?
We are looking into that.
Okay.
This structure itself, it is in the interior of the campus. Do you have any sense of whether this would be visible to the neighboring community?
We think it will not be visible. And when we go to zoning in 2 weeks, we plan to have a slide that will show a balloon floated up so you can see that from Lancaster Avenue, it's very far from Lancaster. You can't see it from the field house, Ithan Avenue, because we're over there. And I think that based on County Line being so low, I'm not sure that you could see it from there either. So it's going to be minimal, if anything, and I think what you may see are the spires.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, no.
Got it.
Well, I know in the past, when I was an undergrad, I actually used Villanova's library to study, and I was not a Villanova student. Will this be available to residents, at least on a limited basis of the township?
Yeah, I was going to answer that.
Hi, Chris Kowalski with Villanova. Our current library is accessible to the public. Based on some of the materials that we house, we have to provide access. I would envision that being the same here. But what Mary Lou said, as far as not being a destination, I'm not sure that we would have the kind of programming that would, be advertising, like come to the library necessarily. But as a resource, just like the rest of our campus, it would be available to the extent that we'd be able to make it available.
Okay, thank you.
Mary Lou, you testified, I don't know if that's the right term, you've explained.
I didn't swear on anything.
You explained to us
Yeah.
that part of the use for this library will be to display, I guess, artifacts or.
Yes, we have some special collections that right now are in a much smaller area in existing Falvey, which it's a rare collection room, and one of the special collections that we have is a Martin Luther King collection, and that so this area will be really a secure area. We'll be bringing out displays in different areas within the library and also securing them in a space that has the proper environmental controls in there.
Are the items that you're contemplating and displaying in the new space, are they being displayed today? Are they on display today somewhere?
I believe so. Jim? Are they being displayed today in the existing?
Yes, we currently display in the library in this special collections room artifacts. They're also in display cases throughout the floor, the first floor when you come in, and we're going to try and consolidate and create a room for most of those.
Got it. So in all fairness, what I'm really trying to examine is whether this creates rationale for parking.
Okay.
In other words, does this become more of a museum use, which necessitates folks from the outside of the community wanting to see the exhibit and whatnot?
I understand where you're going with that question. I'm not sure that it would generate noteworthy amounts of traffic. So just like anything that we have as far as programming is concerned, we invite the general public to. We have a email distribution list of well over 3,000 people, as well as social media. We advertise events all the time. It's not a significant generator of participation. We see that no matter what the programming is. So while there might be some specific items of note that might be targeted to interested populations, it's highly unlikely that it would generate additional traffic of any note. And if it did, much like events, commencement, basketball game that's going on tonight, large-scale theater performance, that would have to be planned and programmed in conjunction with the rest of the university calendar, because whether there's new parking spots or not, we're only able to serve so much on campus, and with a priority of accommodating our classes and related student activities. Everything else comes after that.
How utilized is the parking garage that's right by there? I mean, is that used 100%, all the spots? I mean, to your point, because I'm not a fan of creating more parking.
Yeah.
And I think the university's done a great job in accommodating the parking spots for the growth, at least over the past 10, 15 years.
Yep.
But if you still have some under capacity of the parking garage that's right by there, so for the general public, either for Radnor residents or whoever, for whatever event.
On a day-to-day basis, there is parking available, whether it's that lot or we typically direct our visitors now to the garage at Eighth and Lancaster. But that that would be the case moving forward. However, if folks with mobility issues need to come closer to campus, if there are special events, if they happen during off-peak times, particularly over a break or things like that, then we do try to get folks as close to the venue as possible. So again, that would be managed as well. And for what it's worth, I know we're talking about university events. We have, since the last time we were before you, implemented a university event calendar system. So it's specifically designed to minimize conflicts. For instance, tonight there's a basketball game. There shouldn't be a presentation in the Mullins Center of any significance, certainly not in the main venue. So again, if something were to come up, if we were to have a project of significant, or a program of significant public interest, it would be managed in a way to ensure that parking was not an issue.
Okay, great. Just to follow up on the parking, in the existing library, how far away is the parking today?
If you were coming as a visitor to campus,
Yeah.
It would be roughly at the corner of Ithan and Lancaster, the general visitor parking. So it would be another,
You would park at the Ithan garage.
this would be another 500 feet, not even 300 feet away.
Got it. Thank you.
Basically, the new
Actually,
building
this
is
is closer. I'm sorry,
closer.
this is closer.
It's closer. The new building is going to be
Yes.
closer.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Well, I'd like to make a motion as a Villanova grad that we recommend approval by the zoning board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, good luck.
Thanks.
For all new buildings that are going up in Villanova, is there a standard, will there be a standard as to how the buildings will be built up to LEED certification or from an ESG standpoint?
So on our campus, and this started in 2007, I believe, that any new building has to meet silver as a minimum. We shoot for gold. We haven't gotten to platinum yet. And as a renovation, we must be certified.
Okay,
So yes, we're very committed to it.
thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, and good luck.
All right, bye.
All right, I'd like to ask for a 5-minute recess. The next item on the agenda is the Historic Preservation Ordinance, and I will actually step off the dais and present to you guys some progress that we've made on the ordinance and get a flavor for how y'all feel about going forward. So let's break until 8:23, and that'll give me the opportunity to set up. Thanks.
doesn't Radnor goes either 1.25 or 1.5? And I thought that extra 1.25 was essentially to build sidewalks.
That wouldn't that only be open space?
Yeah, it might be open space, it's definitely not sidewalk.
The transfer tax in Radnor is higher than it is
Even
anywhere else.
though Radnor is a homeless charter municipality, taxation is governed at the state level. So you can only do the things you're permitted to do at the state level. And so for it's not real estate, it's earned income tax.
I thought real estate it's all property. If you sell a property in most places in the county, it's 1% transfer tax. And in Radnor, it's either 1.25 or 1.5.
Well, we don't charge that.
I don't know who we.
So
It costs more in Radnor to sell.
I do the transfer to real estate, and the only thing that I require is $150 for the transfer.
Yeah.
Where's the 1% go? Everybody has to pay 1% in the county.
It's 1% on the seller side, 1% on the buyer
Right.
side.
And
But
then in Radnor, it's more.
I don't think it's more.
I don't know, I don't have any information on this.
That's at the state level. Real estate transfer tax is at the state. What she's talking about is like a deed registration kind of
I'm talking
thing.
about real estate transfer.
Yeah, it's
And
set
at
at the
least
state.
unless it changed in the last 20 years. 20 years ago, it was more in Radnor.
So I don't know about it, I just know that we don't have any mechanism for funding sidewalks. The board, or bond, grant, general fund, or assessment. After that, I got nothing. How many slides you got? We okay?
I have a ton, but we're not gonna go through it all.
Okay.
I have, how many slides? I'm gonna stop before we get into the picnic with the board members.
So you just want to introduce?
Yeah, I'm just gonna give them a sense of history. I'm not gonna talk for more than 30 minutes. That's all I need.
Okay.
Oh. Somebody,
You're not
somebody
gonna have
push
my
me.
attention for 30 minutes.
Pinch me.
That's a long time to talk.
Well,
You don't think?
I do. I do.
I think I'm praying to God he's being facetious.
Well.
And there's public comment.
Oh.
We're just introducing it. Let me see how many slides I do have. Oh, this doesn't.
Check your temperature. When you come in, during COVID, we had to come in, face it.
You're not gonna read everything from the PowerPoint.
Absolutely. Are you kidding me?
Steve and I are gonna leave if you do that.
You're a captive audience. Are you gonna resign?
I don't feel well.
No, so there's a ton of stuff in here. Most of it I will not get to present on. So I will try not to waste your time too much.
Hello, Matt. I didn't see you come in.
Hey, Bear. How are you?
Good. How's the job? Mr. Employee.
To corral everybody after you do a recess. You know what? I might take
Good thought. You know, you're.
what happens. They do come? Is it a fast walk or?
You know, we have a quorum. I mean,
Yeah.
and he's in the room, you know. Mike.
I guess I can start, since Mike's in the room. So I wanted to spend a little time, before we do that, you know, I'd like to say that, in the words of a famous Philadelphia mayor, John Street, I'll be brief no matter how long it takes. I'd like to speak about a subject that's near and dear to our heart, which is, or my heart anyway, the Historic Preservation Ordinance, which Radnor Township does not have at this moment. So I'll give you an update on what that looks like, as well as where we could possibly go from here. So the history of this idea that we should have the ordinance actually came from the Board of Commissioners. So in at their June 14th, 2021 meeting, the Board of Commissioners, during their meeting, requested the Planning Commission to provide comment on a proposed ordinance. And this ordinance is incorporated in the attachment that's part of the agenda tonight. So they actually submitted this ordinance to us. Somewhere along the lines, there was actually no handoff to the Planning Commission. And then further in the year, 1001 Eagle Road came to see us. And as part of the development plan, the public comment by Michael Carney was that he would have liked to see the guardhouse on that property being preserved or saved. And he made note at that time that we didn't have an ordinance to do that. And it was only because of the foresight of the developer, Rockwell, that particular asset was saved during subsequent meetings. So having watched that meeting, on June 13th, 2022, I made the request that the Board of Commissioners actually refer that notice back to us. At that time, they took a poll and they decided that they wanted to see us take another stab at this ordinance that we never took a stab at before, which is, again, in your agenda packet. So as part of the preparation for tonight, I consulted with, informally, with two individuals. One, Beverly Barnes, you've heard from tonight in the initial comment. She's a preservation planner for Delaware County. I also consulted informally with Greg Pritchard, who has worked with Beverly Barnes, but his official job is also a preservation planner for Lower Marion Township that adjoins us, that we beat tonight in our football game at the high school. He's actually in the audience this evening. So the proposed, as a result of that conversation, we determined that the proposed ordinance that the Board of Commissioners sent to us was a good baseline, but it requires additional work, particularly with respect to which items we're preserving. So I wanted to take you through that, but first I wanted to go over the authority that we have to actually do this work and recommend to the Board of Commissioners the ordinance proposal that I'm presenting to you guys tonight. So the Municipal Planning Code, Article 2, Section 209(1)B, actually grants us this power. So we can prepare and we can present to the governing body, this is the Board of Commissioners, a zoning ordinance. We can make recommendations to amend existing zoning ordinances. We don't do that very often, but the power is in the MPC. It's granted to us. And also, we can create studies and talk to other individuals who are experts in the field as part of our work to propose ordinances like this. So we do have the ability to do this. It's in the MPC. I'm sure there's other legislation that empowers us to suggest ordinances. And of course, that doesn't supersede the Board of Commissioners' request that we take a look at it. So before we get into it, I wanted to define what historic assets are and what we're trying to protect. So historic assets could be buildings, they could be artifacts, but generally speaking, the standard definition, it's incorporated here, there's 10 different elements, starting with significant character, interest, or value, and generally speaking, and if you have 2 or 3 out of the 10 elements, you could call a historic asset, you could protect a historic asset. That's generally in a lot of the ordinances that we see out there. So those are typically the elements. It could be an architecturally significant building. It could be an artifact, such as a mile marker. Number 8, which is interesting, noteworthy work of a designer or architect. This is something that we saw with the Jewish Federation when they were proposing to demolish a structure and replace one. So that building would potentially could be subject to the protection of a proposed ordinance. So what's interesting is that when we think about historic assets, we think that as non-historic preservation people, we think that the gold standard is a National Register of Historic Places designation, and this is, as outlined here, it's the nation's official list of all the of properties recognized for their significance. But actually, the listing in the National Register does not protect any property. All of that is done on a municipal level. So that's why we need a historic preservation ordinance if we hope to protect any historic assets. And I wanted to give you an example of what this looks like ordinance-wise. So in the center is Radnor Township. All the surrounding communities have historic preservation ordinances. We do not, so I think that there's a gap here. Some of the, we obviously have 3 historic districts, which place a greater emphasis on protection of historic structures. But outside of those historic districts, there are structures that are not protected. And I gave you 3 examples, one of which we're familiar with, the main building at Chanticleer. That's outside of the district, also not protected. It is on the National Register of Historic Places, but should the foundation want to do something with that building, they're free to do so. Camp Woods, this is an estate that was built relatively recently. This is where George Washington's army spent the winter of 1977-78. And of course, the Radnor Friends Meeting House. This is not the original structure, but it's historically significant, built in 1717. There's other examples that are not listed here, but all of these structures are not protected today. So the ordinance that was passed down by the Board of Commissioners really does 5 things. Number one, it establishes an overlay district which covers the entire township. It covers all of Radnor, and it really, depending on what makes up the inventory of historic assets, we'll get into that a little bit tonight, it covers all of them. It works like a superseding overlay on our existing zoning code. In terms of the assets, it mandates the creation of a listing and even a map of all Radnor historic resources. It also creates a historical committee, as opposed to our existing organization, HARB, and the two will serve two different goals. Of course, the members could be members of HARB, but also others that have some experience in historic preservation planning. The real reason why you'd want an ordinance like this is that it would prohibit demolition without oversight or alteration without oversight of historic assets without some sort of approval by the Board of Commissioners. And of course, you would have, as part of this ordinance, some penalties for noncompliance. So what I wanted to do tonight is just get a temperature check of whether we should pursue this. I think the Board of Commissioners definitely indicated to us that they want to see this from us. They want to see a recommendation from us. And if you agree that we would form a subcommittee of the existing board to continue working on this ordinance, we would then continue soliciting input from the concerned public, work with the Radnor Historical Society, and maybe present a draft of the ordinance on our January meeting, so basically 60 days from now, so that we can vote on it and present it to the Board of Commissioners. So, with that being said, this will conclude my formal presentation tonight. With the rest of this, which you'll get a digital copy of this, are the basic elements of the existing ordinance. As I alluded to before, there is some work to do, particularly in this ordinance, is like what makes up the list. The ordinance that was passed on to us by the Board of Commissioners recommended that we use a survey from 1986 plus another survey from 2003. I think there's a better approach to collecting the list of assets. And then it also charts what happens. So how do we form the historical committee that would adjudicate any demolition or renovations? What would they actually do? What are the types of regulations upon the properties that are part of this historically protected list? And how do you obtain a demolition or a renovation permit? These are all of the elements that are incorporated here. For the sake of brevity, I won't go through them all. And I think there would be an appropriate time to discuss this after we have a more or less finished draft version of that. But at the end of the day, the formation of the creation of this ordinance, the formation of the historical committee to evaluate applications for the protected assets, it would put an additional burden on the owners of those properties. The offset would, of course, be that we do have cultural, historic assets in this township that we would like to see protected. So it is going to be a balancing act between individual property rights as well as the rights of the community to maintain those assets in their present condition. So I'll take some questions, and at the end I'd like to poll you guys for what your tolerance is to go forward.
In view of your summary that we're going to seek comment from a variety of stakeholders and organizations and historical groups, I'm a little concerned about the timeline being January.
It's not a hard deadline. I think, once we get into the, I should have, if there is a tolerance from the Planning Commission for us to move forward, I will certainly have a draft version at which we would certainly work with historic preservation experts, Radnor Historical Society, and this is sort of a process that may take longer than anticipated, but I would certainly like to move at fast speed and produce a quality draft by January, and that may not be the final draft.
I think one of the tougher things in a tight time frame with this is, because I covered the Philadelphia Historical Commission for 10 years, and one of the great tensions in that group and in the room was people would buy a property and then they'd find out it was historic by some nature, right? And they would try to fix the building or do something, they put a new roof on, and they were roadblocked all the time because of cost, because people disagreed with, how they wanted to do something. So getting that list, making the determination of what properties in Radnor are going to fall under the auspices of this new ordinance is really crucial to take the right amount of time, I think, because otherwise you end up, it becomes a penal exercise for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think to address that concern, I think the elephant in the room is, are we going to take away property owners' rights? All right, and I don't think anybody in this township, unless you're an absolute historic preservation purist, right, is going to be interested in that. Certainly there are those folks, but for the most part, I live in a home that was built in 1910. Perhaps it qualifies, and I would be disappointed if I woke up one morning and the property was protected and I couldn't put in the type of windows that I wanted. So part of this will be a give and take, right? In most townships where this is successful, there's a certain give by the township in exchange for the protection of the property. I don't think anybody here, including myself, would be interested in taking away property owners' rights by the stroke of a pen. And I think we'll also have the benefit of the public to advise us on that.
So I guess my question, getting back to the timing, is in 60 days, do we expect to have something that's final? Like, what do we expect to have in 60 days? More to Skip's point, like compressed time frame. This is really, for us, the first we're hearing of it. I mean, I know you've been doing a lot of work, but this is the first that this commission has been presented with it.
I think what you can expect, right? And I would request that we form a subcommittee, and you're certainly welcome to participate, and I'd love to have your support and input. I think what you can expect in January, if we do move at the pace that we're moving, is a better draft, right? There's not going to be anything final. And I want to actually separate the list of properties being protected with the ordinance, because it is possible, and most definitely highly likely, that we will pass the ordinance, but there will not be an actual list attached to it. The list will be ever evolving and a work in progress, because, as I mentioned to you, it's a give and take. But we have to have some sort of a basis on the books in order to pull in.
MJ, in the materials that I saw that were attached about this ordinance, it is a full-blown ordinance with all sorts of provisions. It refers to lists of properties. Is that from another township, or is that a Radnor list?
So the surveys that are referenced in the ordinance are Radnor Township surveys. Our approach, my suggested approach on this, would be that we don't follow that. That's actually the part of the ordinance that requires a lot more work. So I propose that we scrap that, because it also references properties that are on the National Historic Register.
If you want participation from the public and different historical societies, it might be good to have a sort of a rudimentary example of what you actually are going to suggest. In other words, if everybody expects Chanticleer to be on there and the Quaker Meeting House to be on there, but Willows is on there too, probably, and I'm sure there are other properties. There's a little house next to my dry cleaner that was restored in 1950. It was supposedly built in 1750. It's actually for sale right now. I think that having a list of, even if it's imperfect and incomplete, for people to look at early on is a useful thing. That's my opinion. I don't think it locks us into that list. It just says, this is the kind of thing we're thinking about.
That's a fair comment.
So as far as a list goes, if you don't have a list now, how is the list going to be created hereafter?
So my suggested approach on creating this list would be to go to the Radnor Historical Society and have them recommend a list of properties that and see where that takes us. Now, again, I don't think anybody is contemplating that we just make a list of properties and it'll be a part of this ordinance without some sort of public participation of the impacted folks, but I think that would be a good place to start.
I just mean also, who is it going to be property by property that the BOC would put on the list? Who can put properties on a list?
So that would actually be part of the duties of the created. If we adopt the structure of the suggested ordinance, that would actually be the duties of the historical committee or historical commission.
By recommendation to the BOC, or would they be doing it on their own?
They would be doing that on their own.
So can I just ask Mary?
You sure can.
Have you heard some of the discussion going on over here?
I've heard all the discussion going on.
Do you have any 2 cents?
Well,
to
we were
throw
just
in?
talking about that, and I think that the County Planning Commission does a survey and they have a list, and I think that you don't have to invent the wheel there. Get the list and look at it, and then kind of go through it as a group and say, well, why is this building on there, or why is that building not, and use that as your starting place. I think that's probably even a better resource than the Radnor Historical Society.
But part of my question is also, who has the authority to put something on a list?
It's,
You can make your own list right now.
yeah,
But
there's no such thing as the authority to put something on a list. Like if you're the National Register of Historic Places, they have their own criteria, and they make the determination as to whether they have very strict standards, and you have to submit all this stuff for it. But as long as you have a basis and there's a rational basis to determine what you consider valuable historically, you're asking who, I'm answering how, and I realize that's a little bit different.
I guess what I'm saying is, if you create this draft ordinance, then it goes to the BOC and they make a determination of whether to pass it or not, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I'm just saying, if you have this addendum of who would be affected by it, you're impacting someone's rights, and I'm just saying, I don't know that some standalone advisory, what would normally be an advisory committee, could do that.
You know, if I recall, the Lower Merion went through this, and I've been in front of Lower Merion a number of times, but I think that homeowners could opt out. My recollection is.
I've drafted a number of these ordinances, or assisted communities in drafting a number of these ordinances, and I have worked with ones where you had the ability, where homeowners had the ability to opt out. So, for example, there'd be a level 1 historic resource, a level 2 historic resource, and a level 3 historic resource. Not all historic resources would be treated the same. So if you were a level 1 and you were eligible or on the National Register of Historic Places, then you couldn't opt out. If you were a level 2, maybe you had the ability to opt out, but there were certain minimum standards: no demolition by neglect, no outright demolition without a permit, and although you could demolish your house, you'd have to offer it up for inspections by the Township Historical Society to see if there were any artifacts that they wanted to take out before they walked away from the project. But you're asking the questions like you're saying, I think, you don't think an advisory committee should have the ability to make those hard selections as to what's going to be listed on the list or not listed on the list. And I think different municipalities do it differently. It's how much control the governing body wants to give up. There's no legal standard, Lane.
So the way that my understanding is that Lower Merion does it, and of course Greg Pritchard is in the room, so he can comment on it, is that it's a carrot approach. Folks that want to put their properties on a protected list inure some sort of benefit for doing so. I think.
Yeah, and to that end, like sometimes the benefit's a density bonus. If it's on a large lot of ground and you want to maybe you can use it a little bit more densely than you can use. Some municipalities go with density bonuses. Some municipalities allow different uses than. So if you're in a residential district and there's a big old historic house, maybe you can use that for a funeral home, which might be a use that's not permitted in that district. Maybe you can use it for a bed and breakfast, a use that's not permitted in that district.
And I certainly don't want to go down that rabbit hole, because once we do that, we'll start criticizing the uses. But there are different ways that we can invite folks in rather than ruling from the pulpit on whether their property is now condemned or not.
But part of this is already defined. I'm actually looking at historical preservation tax credits, what qualifies, what doesn't qualify. So there, if your building is a qualification and you want to do some renovation, you want to put in some new windows, and it's going to cost you more money because of the nature of the historical look or whatever, you're able to apply, you're able to get some sort of tax credits that you're going to be, that you personally will be able to benefit from. So within the document that's either, I think it's, at least what I'm looking at is by the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue, some of that criteria is already set. So there should be, if you're talking about a carrot, this is part, obviously you have bragging rights and taking pride in your community and where we live and all that stuff, but also from a practical financial standpoint, this is something you should, I would say, you should look into.
Sure. And, you know, the level of carrots can run the gamut. And again, it's a balancing act of what we want to allow in exchange for the homeowner preserving their property against some sort of demolition or unmonitored alteration.
You know, one more comment that I can't help myself, but it struck me that we need we're a team and we need a coach. And I know you're trying to be the coach, but if you haven't done this before, do we need an outside consultant early on?
I think that's a great point. I think we may.
Well, we've done it in the past, so we did it with the, that guy from Pittsburgh.
So is your thought that we go back to the BOC and say, let's retain a consultant to help us draft something like this?
Let me just ask, you had someone that you had, I can't remember her name.
So there's two individuals that I've worked with.
And they offered to provide assistance. I don't know how much assistance they want to provide.
So both individuals are experts in their field. I don't know their level of willingness to do the work for us, right? I think we'll get to a certain point and we will definitely need professional vetting of anything that we put together. Maybe the BOC will.
It's not that we can't work and haven't worked on projects in the past, but we may not know how to work as well as we could with.
Well, you're going to need some sort of legal expertise and how to draft the ordinance itself. I mean, I'm not sure if any of us here are attorneys.
Well, we do have a solicitor here that, depending on what the tolerance level is for the township to.
There may be some sort of level of expertise in just writing ordinances. I don't know, Mary, if this is your.
It is kind of what I do for a living, yeah.
Okay.
But as you go through this process, you're going to find that it is directed more by the public's tolerance than anything else. So that's when you're going to find out exactly what the community standards for historical preservation are when you start vetting this different provisions publicly. And it kind of is a very organic process, and it's not scary or oppressive if you go into it with the right framework. Like, you don't have it in your head that you're going to jam certain regulations down the public's throat, that you're going to have a dialogue with the community to determine what works best and what's tolerable and what makes your community the best.
I do think that, if you look at this map of where we stand here, other communities have done this. They may have done it completely differently than we're proposing, but I think we should give this process a try and see where it ultimately leads us. It may lead us to the point where we do need an outside consultant or, an army of solicitors. Certainly somebody like Mary with 40, perhaps 2 years in municipal law. I would argue that she's uniquely qualified to help us.
I have a stupid question. So we're a first-class township. We have home rule, which a lot of townships don't have. Why don't we have a historical commission, and why don't we have a historical ordinance? What was the reason for Radnor not going there, for not investing in this? I mean, to me, I know it's a dumb question, but the answer might be revelatory.
It's not a dumb question, but this is where you could provide us, or one of y'all can provide us more perspective. I'm a relatively recent township resident. I don't know the history of whether this was ever proposed. Certainly, I'll turn the question back to y'all.
I don't know. I would also, I commend with what you're trying to do. And I think as a planning, this is something, one of the reasons why I joined the planning board, to be not reactive, but to be proactive. And I may mention to you out in the hallway, I think this is a great subject matter. I also think something that we should explore on a similar pack, not to detract from with what you're trying to do. And I'd be, with what I'm about to say, I'll easily say, we could do it secondly, once we conclude this process. But I think as a township, we should have some sort of ordinance exploring the fact of building buildings, either homes of a certain size and or commercial space of a certain size, with some sort of level of sustainability as an ordinance. And the questions I was asking the representative from Villanova about this new library, will it be built up to LEED standard? Will the new proposed elementary school that they're thinking about replacing over at Ethan Elementary School, how will that be designed? Well, maybe we should be proactive as a board and lead on this, and saying anything over a certain size, it has to be build up to a certain standard. Maybe put on solar panels on the roof, but at least be proactive and kind of steer the conversation forward.
So, David, I agree clearly, because I wouldn't be standing here today. I think the MPC speaks to this. What it does instruct us to do is that we can't just do this on our own. We have to be directed by our elected officials. We are an advisory body, and we work, we do their bidding, right? In this particular case, the Board of Commissioners has spoken. They've charged us with taking a look at this. We could turn that away. Well, that's one of the choices. We could say, hey, thank you, but no thank you. We don't want to consider it, and return that back to the BOC and leave them to their own devices and whatnot. I don't believe that's the correct approach. In terms of sustainability, that's another admirable effort, and I think that that's something that we as citizens, as well as members of the Planning Commission, we should petition our elected officials to instruct us to work on something like that. I think that's a worthy cause as well. But the MPC is very clear. We work at their behest, and we have limited amount of things that we can introduce on our own.
Well, if you want to form a subcommittee, I'd be interested. Because we, as an architect, a firm that I've been around for a while, we've presented to many boards, historic commissions. We've done major renovations of, an example of, we just finished one in Kansas City. It was 22 stories, built in 1920, on a national register, but not on Kansas City's register. They didn't care what we did with it. But our client was after the tax incentives from the National Register, and so we, of course, had experts on our team to follow all the rules. And there's a lot of interesting situations you get into with these kind of ordinances that can be a serious imposition on. We did one recently with Lower Merion, where they were actually our client bought a house. It had a fragment of a historic house next door on it. How? I don't know how that came about. Somebody built another addition onto it, which we wanted to take down. And the Historic Commission supported that. And we saved the fragment and saved but there was a real discussion there about how to go about doing that, and they were very supportive. So they were very flexible with their code in that case, and I think the result has really been good. There's other instances where we've had judgment passed on it that is so honest, that are so irrational, that you can, because someone did something a long time ago, you have to abide by it. A lot of it's is kind of irrational. So anyway, long story short, if you want to create a subcommittee, I'm happy to be on it. So.
Thank you, Stephen. I do want to say one other thing, and whatever we do, whatever we decide here, you can't legislate the spirit of the law, right? So you can read an ordinance, you can interpret it any of two ways, and I think our Shade Tree Commission has done a remarkable job of transforming itself from the tree police to an agency that actually serves the public and advises the public on what the appropriate trees are and how to protect them and how to do proper planning. And that does not come from the ordinance itself. It comes from the individuals that work on it. That being said, I do feel confident that we in Radnor Township can have a collection of individuals that actually want to help residents and also at the same time protect the important historic assets that we have here, which remain unprotected to this day. So certainly, Stephen, I have your raised hand. I appreciate that. David, you as well. For the rest of you who would like to participate, certainly let me know. I'd like to get sort of a temperature check, not a vote, of whether this is an effort that we should stick our toe into.
Let's put our toes in, but not our whole leg yet.
Not up to the kneecap, I take it.
There's a lot of good the historic ordinances can do for the township. It helps preserve property values. It helps preserve character. I mean, there's so many positive things about it. And I think that the discussion we had earlier about, and there's some real distinctions to be made between commercial projects and private homes. And I kind of believe in incentive programs. We work for a lot of developers. Anytime there's an incentive program, it'll get done much faster than if there isn't. So the National Register, it's all about incentive. They're 20% tax credit. So if there's some way to work that, I think an interview with Lower Merion would be really great. I mean, they've been working on. I can't remember when your code went into effect. It was in the 90s, wasn't it? 2000? Yeah, okay. So they've been working that a long time. It'd be interesting to get their feedback.
Well, no ordinance of this variety is ever finished, right? I think you're undergoing a revision right now, and it's a document that's evergreen. There's supporting documentation that helps residents protect their properties. That's also evergreen, right? So this is the beginning of work which will create and probably leave for somebody else to administer. Is there any one of you that feels like we shouldn't be doing this? Okay. All right. Well,
In favor.
Any additional questions from the board?
Yeah. What's actionable now? Like given that we have 60 days to do something, what action do we take? What's the first action we take after this meeting?
So I think the action that we take is that, now that I have at least two individuals, I think we divide and conquer. We work with the Radnor Historical Society. I didn't expect that you guys would support this unanimously. I expected more of a Q&A. So I don't actually know yet, but we have a good baseline. I'd like to see what kind of list our friends at the Radnor Historical Society can provide us. My understanding is that they've been working informally on something. Then perhaps we could take a look at some of the incentives that our friends at Lower Merion have created to encourage homeowners to join the protected list. Those would be two of the things that come to mind.
Yeah, I was thinking more in terms of like, when would we have a meeting of the subcommittee and when would we assign homework?
Mr. Golis, I don't remember you volunteering.
No, I didn't volunteer.
Oh, you're
He wants to know what he's volunteering
Yeah.
for before he volunteers.
Come see me after.
Sure.
After the meeting.
But I think it would be helpful to have, start a timeline on this.
I think actually January, and I respect with where you're going, but I just think given, I'm looking at my own personal schedule, but it's year end is always crazy. So to give us, maybe something a little bit more realistic would be first quarter.
David, you're a volunteer. I have very limited powers to force a deadline down your throat. So, and I won't do that. So, we'll keep the timeline flexible, but we'll move at some pace. Any other thoughts, comments? All right. All right. Thank you. Any other new business? Okay. Motion to adjourn? Unanimous? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks for your work on this, MJ.